This is not just another nation. It is not just one of the family of nations. This is a nation with a great mission to perform for the benefit of liberty-loving people everywhere.
That we shall be as a city upon a hill.
These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country.
You've come to fight as free men. Free men you are. What will you do without freedom?
Proclaim liberty throughout all the land.
In one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. You gotta fight for your right. Can you dig it?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Real News in the Morning. Time 9:01 in the morning. As far as my watch is telling me, how is everybody doing on this morning? RealNewsRadio.live, RealNewsRadio.live. That is the central landing page, the hub for all things Real News related. Go check us out anywhere that you want to. Anywhere. Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Parler, Minds, ThinkSpot, man, all the sites, all the things, they're all there. They're all connected. They're all related. Mixer's apparently still a thing, at least for a couple more days until that's taken over by Facebook Gaming. I don't know, man. Maybe we'll turn this into a gaming channel. You never really know what Real News is going to do next. And actually, in all sincerity, one of the great ideas that we've tried out in the past that my boy David Chan Thompson was sort of a pioneer on, and I'm pretty sure if we can break this mold, it'll become an awesome thing, is to play games and give political commentary over top of playing games. I mean, that makes a thing in the future. But let's do a quick, Real News poll right now. YouTube, wherever else, we got the unified chat up on the screen here. If you would like to see Mr. Henry and David Sean Thompson play some games and give some political commentary, give us a thumbs up or let us know in the chat section or something like that. And maybe if you want to let us know which game you actually want to see us playing while that's going on, jump on and play some of this stuff with us. Anyways, my name is Mr. Henry, David Sean Thompson. How are you doing over there in the East Tennessee way, buddy?
I am excellent, sir. I actually do have a Facebook page lying in wait. That's actually a gaming page called Tennessee Cabin Fever. Remember, we started that Discord called Tennessee Cabin Fever? We started a Discord called Cabin Fever when they first locked us in our homes, And we always meant to. This was like not what we were going to do. We were not going to do a news show. We were going to play video games and talk politics because we knew Facebook was getting into gaming and that they would promote gamers a lot more than they would promote a news show on the algorithm and to new people and things like that. So we could do it on Real News or we could do it on Tennessee Cabin Fever. But yes, I would love to know if people would accept this Facebook page as being a news and gaming channel, not a gaming news channel,
right? Mind
you, because I don't care about most video games that are coming out. I only care about the ones I like. But man, I just played through a pretty fun, new age Zelda game called Hob. I've played through it twice on the hardest difficulty. It's so fun that I really want to play through it again. But I could play through that game and easily talk about stuff and just stop. And it's really beautiful too. It's got a great soundtrack. It's got some hand painted skyboxes. Really nice. But anyway, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Henry. And East Tennessee is fantastic this morning. It's that's more God's country outside right now than usual. So,
hey, and shout out to anybody that's listening in the Real News audience out here as well. Jessica just told us on Facebook, good morning from PA. That's awesome, man. I didn't know we had some PA listeners now, too. Without doubt, that's probably our interaction with our boy Zig from up there where we're getting some PA listeners. But that's a cool thing, man. We got some listeners outside of Tennessee now. We got some international listeners. I still think that 11 to 12% of our audience or so, the analytics tell us, is made up of international listeners. Jessica, though, what's up PA way? That's awesome. Loving that you're listening from Pennsylvania. Eric already says, hi, I watched a guy play Mario 3 in NES for almost an hour last night. Yeah, exactly. That's how it's going, man. Just chatting about old school games and the ones that made us rage quit. Dude, I rage quit more games than I would like to admit. It was just a thing that you did. Greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment right now, by the way. Let us know how you're doing, what you're struggling with, where you're at psychologically, mentally, physically, any of that stuff, anything you need help with, prayer concerns for. If you need a hot meal made and we got some folks in your community, let us know. We'll try and get something your way. I don't know, literally with anything you need help with, anything you're struggling with, any stories that you're hung up on, right? Like I feel like I can come on here most days, actually. I feel like I come on here and I present some story and it's just this story that like, hey, I got no clue what's going on here. I need some help. Help me out. Let us try and return the favor type thing. What stories are pulling your mind? What would you like to hear us cover type thing? Greatest honesty in the nation appreciation segment, though. Let us know how all that is. Let's dive right into the headlines right now. By the way, Evernote link there, talking about the headlines at the top of the show notes. I mean, at the top of the description of this video, you'll find the Evernote link. That's where you can follow along with all the show notes. Everything's linked, hyperlinked, all that stuff. Jessica just told us the PA is losing its mind. Enough said. Well, man, goodness, I tell you.
If it makes you feel any better, the rest of the country isn't that much better, I think. I think everybody's, at least like everyone somewhere knows some people who are losing their minds.
Yeah.
Including this guy. I've lost my mind at least 7 times, during this whole thing. It takes a while to find it and get it shoved back in there, but it gets done.
Yeah. Jonathan just said in Facebook that talking about video game stuff. He said I gave out save codes for those old games. You remember the Game Genie? Anybody remember that from NES? You could stick right, and then you put in those codes. Dude, I feel like we need a 2020 Game Genie life hack type thing right now. Right, like just give me the source codes, give me the life hack codes. I'm ready to put.
Just take me straight to the last level and let me fight the main boss, so this game can be over and I can save the princess and go through the credits. And move on to the next year, please. Please.
Hey, I'll tell you though, man.
Bowser's going down.
Zelda had to. I'm waving bye to my wife, by the way. She's got to go off to work. Bye, Gobs.
Bye, Gobs.
Bye, Gobs. Gobby is her name, by the way. Sorry, everybody. Anyways, what was I talking about? Yeah, but see, that's the thing, man. If you got to get to the last boss in Zelda, you gotta progress along the way. You got to get his armor up. You got to get the shield better. You got to get the sword better. And you can only do that by defeating all the other little bosses along the way. There's a lesson there somewhere. Speaking of lessons in there somewhere, local stories here, Tennessee related. I mean, I don't want to focus on this too much. Just give some quick number updates, and you'll see them right there. WKRN headline, 1359. That's 1,359 new COVID-19 cases. 53,514 is the total here in Tennessee, and 665 deaths in Tennessee. Again, keep in mind that these are aggregate total numbers, I would assume. Obviously, these are the total numbers that we have since we started taking account of these numbers. There's also a story I have here from Tennessee indicating that downtown Nashville is now the core of the coronavirus outbreak, at least as it pertains to this Middle Tennessee area. And the only reason why that's an update for some Middle Tennessee folks here is because the Tennessean indicates that it once was Antioch, or at least a month or two ago it was Antioch, which is not downtown Nashville for anybody that's unfamiliar. Now it is shifted to downtown Nashville, they're saying, which oddly enough kind of plays into the final story of the day today. And actually, if you're following along in the show notes, let me jump past this next local story into the last local story because it plays off well. So we just touched this story talking about downtown Nashville is now the core of coronavirus outbreak. It's no longer Antioch. Fox 17 is reporting that Nashville bars are filing a temporary restraining order against the metro government. And I would presume, maybe it's not the best word, let me assume that several other bars or local businesses might be doing this as well. Shine, by the way, dude, I'm sorry I pull from Tennessee so much. I hate paywalls. Almost.
It's not a paywall. It's because I block ads.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
And that's why I get that. But it's okay, man. Don't worry about it. You don't have to stop the show because the Tennessean sucks. You don't have to do that. Don't blame yourself for the Tennessean sucking, okay?
Every time I pull something from the Tennessean, though, there's a little bit of cringe and a little portion of me just like atrophies off, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, well, luckily you usually put the text of what you're going to read in the show notes, and I'm sure just like I am, everyone else is following along at home and is clicking the show notes in the description, and they see what you're going to see anyway without even having to click on the Tennessean.
Tennessean, though. If you don't know, you got to live in Tennessee to understand. Tennessean's it's not the source of preference, shall I say. Anyways, Fox 17 is reporting that Nashville bars, Midtown Bar restaurant owner who filed a lawsuit against Tennessee Governor Lee and Nashville Mayor John Cooper and other local government officials, has now fired a request for a temporary restraining order, essentially legal talk for like, hey, stop what you're doing now. stop it right now because you're hurting me and we got to figure out some legal stuff. But in the meantime, just stop it for a second until we can figure it out because you're causing me harm. Now, he initially filed this lawsuit, like we said, against Governor Lee and Mayor Cooper. A request for a temporary restraining order has now been filed to the United States District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee. It lists a couple different businesses here. You can see them for yourself in the show notes there. You can see them for yourself in the article itself. It's Kid Rock's place, Honky Tonk. It's a steakhouse place. It's a couple places on the strip there, Broadway. The request states that, quote, the defendant shall be restrained, again, knowing the defendants as government entities in this case, the defendants shall be restrained from targeting or selectively prosecuting the plaintiffs as it relates to enforcement of Metropolitan Nashville Health Code, Mayor John Cooper's reopening plan, and any public health emergency orders from Dr. Michael Caldwell or the Metro Board of Health. Additionally, it states the defendants are also enjoined in restraint from pursuing the prosecution of the Metro Citation. It's the Metro Citation. It's the thing that gives the local body the allowance to do what they're doing to shut down, or phase 2 to restrict certain businesses. Now, the proceedings have been set for July 15th, 2020 in General Sessions Environmental Court for Nashville. And I'm wondering, man, the reason why I jumped to this story first of all is because I'm wondering if we're going to see.
Hold on, wait a minute. What the heck is a General Sessions Environmental Court? I've never heard of such a thing. I've heard of family court. I've heard of Sessions Court. It's like I've heard of dragonfly. I've heard, but I've never seen an elephant fly. Like what is happening here? What is the environmental court?
Right, like what are they responsible for handling type thing, right?
Well, whenever I see an adjective in front of court, I assume it's not a real court. I assume it's like 6 lawyers, none of them representing the defendant, all representing the plaintiff, or the other way around, and then a judge who basically does what those 6 lawyers say, like family court.
Yeah, I hear. Whenever
I hear a word, maybe we should figure that out. Why is it the environmental court? What is that?
Google's telling me right now this: whenever a dispute arises over the enforcement of Davidson County Metropolitan Code of Laws and Regulations, they are brought to the Environmental Court, a division of General Sessions Court. This docket was created in 2001 to address violations pertaining to buildings, trash, debris in neighborhoods, and business sites. So I give it a say, environmental. It's a okay.
Why can't it just be court? Right? The place where you go if you're harmed by someone. I don't understand why they need a special category unless it's not the rules of actual court.
Right.
I mean, that
goes on to say also
Sorry, I really didn't mean to put you on the spot, Grant. I'm really sorry about that.
No, it's something I didn't understand.
I was kind of asking rhetorically. I assumed you wouldn't know. I thought we could just complain about it and guess what it was and make it sound as dark and scary as possible. But it sounds like it's just a bureaucracy.
It is. And in all sincerity, man, that's one of the reasons why I brought this story up, is because I'm wondering, hey, if Jessica wants to tell us something PA way, over there in Pennsylvania, if she's hearing similar things about businesses doing this. I don't think this should be surprising to anybody. This seems like a natural progression. Right, the push and take and the give and fold and all that other nonsense, right? I feel like this shouldn't be an entirely surprising story to most people. About some businesses are probably just not going to sit back and sort of, dare I say, willingly take this shutdown. And I know that might be harsh for some people to hear, because some people are going to hit that. It's going to hit their ears in the sense of saying, what do you mean willingly take this shutdown? They're doing it for the betterment of their fellow man. Well, yeah, kind of, man, but we're asking them to basically lose a job. We're asking them to basically not be able to put food on the table. And that's not even speaking in hyperbole. I'm not attempting to fearmonger or even be bombastic when I say stuff like that either. I mean, I don't know if you owned a bar in downtown, and if you didn't have the financial means to own another source of income, or if you didn't diversify your sources of income, which is a fairly difficult thing to do nowadays. There's a lot of time that's involved in something like that. I don't know, man. What would you do? What would you do in this situation? I suppose you could just hope for unemployment and just sort of fingers crossed, see how long that's going to play out for. But eventually something like that's going to run out, I suppose. I don't know. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong. It's a story that I'm fairly certain is going to be hitting a lot of other states. Quick transition into another story from the Nashville scene that I also, oddly enough, and thinking might hit other states. Maybe not in the same way that's hitting us. But if we're talking about budgetary issues of concern, we're talking about decreasing police funding. I see some of this stuff being interrelated. Money is sparse in general. We're talking about issues of criminal justice reform. That's a major push that's going on right now. We're talking about decreasing the size of both legislation, law itself, regulation, and therefore, i.e., the size of prison population as well. I would think Nashville Scene is now indicating that Nashville and Core Civic are veering towards a nasty split. Now, this is, again, Nashville-centric for a lot of people, but most people in Tennessee, I'm pretty sure, should have an understanding as to who and what Core Civic is.
Grant, I do not know what Core Civic is.
It's the privatized prison system in Tennessee, and a lot of activists in the area.
Wow, that's not a really clear name for that at all.
No, it's not.
I had no idea that was a prison. Well
Right.
done on the marketing. You're like, we're Core Civic,
right?
we're part of the core, we're essential. You know?
And I mean, a lot of the folks that are activists in the local area here in Tennessee or in Middle Tennessee have a major problem with Core Civic for most of the basic reasons that people have a problem with privatized prison systems. Now, that is whether we should privatize the prison system or not is a totally separate conversation from what's happening currently. It's an entirely separate conversation. But I will say that a quick anecdote to sort of bring everybody up to date. AFP, Americans for Prosperity, we had this massive criminal justice reform symposium. I mean, it is with all kind of organizations. It was with the NAACP, the ACLU, is with Core Civic, oddly enough. Governor Lee came out and gave a speech. AFP was there, obviously. Project Return, a fantastic organization here in the Nashville area, ran by a lady named Betty. Betty's just one of the best folks I've ever met, like genuinely one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. Right? Took her law degree and basically said, you know what? Forget about practicing law. I'm going to go help people right where they're at. Project Return basically finds people as soon as they get out of prison and then just gives them that next step. Because a lot of people don't realize once you exit prison, it's kind of like, wipe my hands clean. You're on your own, buddy. Whatever you came in with is what you exit with. And they don't care what your plan afterwards is. I mean, you literally get dropped off at a bus stop and then whatever happens just happens. There's no plan in place. There's nowhere to go. There's nobody to call. There's no money to be provided, right? And a lot of people would say, well, that's just the way it should be. But at the same time, if we're worried about recidivism, somebody somewhere has to be concerned about, well, how do we get these people plugged back into society, man? Otherwise, you can't get mad at that perpetual revolving door, you know? I'm getting off topic here a little bit. Project Return is the thing that helps out with that. We had Men of Valor there. Men of Valor is another program that people enter into. Takes the recidivism rate in Tennessee and cuts it in half and then some. Fantastic program. All of these folks were here at this criminal justice reform symposium. And at some point during the middle of the speech, it was when this guy from Core Civic was speaking. And this was about an hour or two into the entire symposium. There was like 400 or 500 people at this thing. It was a big organization, big gathering. And at some point into the speech when this guy was speaking, some random person got up from the audience and started holding up a sign and started screaming. And then another person started doing it as well. And it was a little bit chaotic. And there's one of those shock moments where you can't really tell what's happening or anything like that. And I almost thought it was like stage theater or some sort of like performative art piece or something like that. Until, I started realizing the person from Core Civic was not really in on whatever the gag was at the time. So I was like, oh, this is a thing. Well, then sure enough, 12 other folks get up and start standing in the front of the line. It's one of those things. It ends up happening. Now, I bring that story up only to indicate out of everybody that I just mentioned, ourselves, Core Civic, ourselves, Americans for Prosperity, Core Civic, NAACP, ACLU, Governor Lee, Project Return, Men of Valor. These activists were only there to protest Core Civic, and it was a very, very frustrating thing because apparently Core Civic was also trying to get on the same page of criminal justice reform, which is an odd thing for people to consider because that would seemingly take them out of business. At least the way that it works in Tennessee, or so said Core Civic CEO Damon Hininger. He basically indicated the only reason why they exist is because the overcrowding and overpopulation of the prison system in Tennessee. So he basically just takes the overflow. The private system basically just takes the overflow. If there is no overflow, they go out of business. On the protesters getting on their protest, Core Civic trying to solve the criminal justice reform system is a little bit beyond the story of this Nashville scene. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up. To finalize where we are now, though, basically what ends up happening is that on July 6th, at a press conference last week, this guy O'Connell is he's a council member here, Freddie O'Connell. he and a council member, Emily Benedict, announced a plan that would see Nashville extend its contract with CoreCivic until the Davidson County Sheriff's Office could take over the MDF in July 2022. Now, the sheriff had emphasized in his letter that his department could run the facility if it had the money to operate it effectively in enough time to transition. But on July 6th, CoreCivic CEO, the guy I just mentioned, Damon Henninger, he sent a long letter to his own, to the sheriff and other Metro officials. The message essentially said, you can't kick us out because we're just leaving, so we're done. This is his letter right here. While we acknowledge that it's Metro's prerogative to take steps toward ending our contract, we can't allow our company, more importantly our employees, to be used as a punching bag by political opportunists who do not value the services we provide. He said the company would provide a 90-day transition plan beginning immediately and ending on October 4th. And again, this is a strange way to prove the entire point, man, but I think this is just sort of like pulling back a veil a little bit of what's actually happening in the prison system in our state and other states. You have a privatized system. A lot of people don't even know you have a privatized system that has to somehow cooperate, get along with, and figure out how the plan interacts with the state system. And then stuff like this happens, man. People's emotions get involved. Human beings get involved. I mean, I don't know. And while these people's human being emotions are getting involved, real lives are being placed at stake somewhere around this state. Real lives in a private prison system, you got to figure out what's going on with them afterwards now. And again, as I said before, the point of me bringing this up has nothing to do yet with whether a privatized system or a public prison system should be the way to go. I think that's left for an entirely different thing, but it is important to bring attention to something like this because, again, the reason why I brought the Nashville bar story up is because I'm predicting, look in other states, look in other areas in the state, something like this may start happening. The reason why I bring this prison system thing up is because I'm saying, again, this is very, very specific to Nashville, very, very specific to CoreCivic, obviously. But I don't know. I could see something like this happening in other states too. As I transition to some national stories, by the way, here, let me hit some of the comments in Facebook and anything else. And I'll give Sean a chance to reply as well, because next we're getting into China. Jonathan said, that's actually a lie. I assume he was responding to something else here in the comment section. Eric said, not caring puts them right back in prison. I've worked with many who have been in and out of prison. Jonathan said, there's a lot of anti-recidivism programs we funded in this last session. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question to ask, folks. Is how do people feel about funding prison systems as opposed to funding recidivism systems? I mean, I guess it fundamentally comes down to what you think the purpose of a prison system is. Is it, some type of to get these people off the street, or somehow rehabilitation to make them active members of society again, right? Some of the recidivism systems that are operating in Tennessee right now, Men of Valor, one in particular, man, does a fantastic job, at least by way of the statistics, right? Jessica said, yeah, they throw you out to nothing. People should be helping them reintegrate society because it's too hard. I mean, that's the truth, man. That is the absolute truth. Look, I don't feel bad saying this. Vulnerability breeding vulnerability. I had no idea that's how it happens. I should have. I definitely should have. But until I started having more and more conversations with this Project Return folks and the stories, not just anecdotal stories, but statistics that they would end up in telling you, the percentage of individuals that just leave the prison system with nobody to reach out to, nowhere to go, no place to stay. I mean, nothing, man. Like absolutely nothing. And I don't even know necessarily whose responsibility that is. It's just something that needs to be recognized for sure. Absolutely. Because again, that perpetual wheel starts spinning again, man. And Kelly says that has to weigh on one's spirit, praying for him. Working backwards here in the comment section. Jonathan said, CoreCivic is the privatized prison system. They are national. I didn't know that part, that they are national. Definitely should have realized that. He said they were headquartered in Nashville is where they started. Very interesting to hear that. Let's see here. Yeah, CoreCivic is withdrawing their contract. And then Jessica said, my son's granddad is a code enforcement officer. He's had to shut down so many businesses because it's his job. He's very upset about it because he knows a lot of these people will not be able to open back up. Oh, man, that's tragic, right? Yeah.
So it sounds like from what Jonathan's saying is that we're not losing the private prison. What we're losing is the administration offices of those private prisons.
Okay.
And that they weren't, what's really kind of sad about the thing is these activists are thinking I bet they're thinking a private prison is leaving. Right? But what they did was get rid of a tax base in Nashville. People who were paid pretty good and then go out and spend money in their sales taxes, and they pay property taxes for the homes they own and things like that. I guess all those people will leave. I don't know. We'll follow up on the story, but it just shows you how things get twisted and how if you only have, so many people are operating on super high emotion on part of the story. And then other people are acting very calmly and know the whole story and are directing people with high emotion. It's very interesting. You can use that as a Rosetta Stone for a lot of stories.
Eric said on Facebook too. I think he's talking about the shutting down businesses story. He said, I don't hear many politicians talking about this. Something that would give the greatest amount of help to the greatest amount of people. Suspend all taxes. Politicians are supposed to be leaders. If we are being forced to not get paid, maybe they should lead by example. Yeah, it's very interesting, man. Pair that with what Jessica said, where she said her son's granddad is a code enforcement. I presume from the story she told, this guy, her son's granddad, doesn't like enforcing the codes that he has to because it shuts down businesses. And as those businesses shut down, they simply don't have the capital reserves to open back up. So as you shut them down once for a prolonged period of time, they're just gone. They're just gone. It's happened to 3 restaurants no less than 5 miles down the road from me. I'm in the Franklin area here on that Franklin Strip. There's a couple different barbecue joints and a couple other outlying areas, an Italian place as well. That's just right around that strip. It's exactly what Jessica's talking about. They had to shut them down for 2 months and they're just done. They're not going back into business, at least not that particular location. Hey, by the way, realnewsradio.live, realnewsradio.live. It's the central landing page for everything Real News does. You'll find all our links there. You can find other ways to interact with us and comment with us. Anything y'all are needing at all, just reach out to either myself or Sean. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Speaking about having a conversation with you, one of the updates for the story that we're going to cover right now actually came from one of these comment sections that Sean and I are involved in. It's a message chat thing that our friend Kelly put together. He's got a bunch of other folks there that are Real News, family alum. We trade articles. We talk after the show. We send memes to each other. It's a fun time. Come join us. But she sent an update to this story. Here's the story though from the Epoch Times, Epic Times, whatever you want to call it. U.S. officially withdraws from the WHO, World Health Organization. I don't know, man. Before I dive into this, too, is anybody surprised by that timing? Is anybody surprised that this actually happened right now? I mean, because that's the analysis you are going to hear today. Is that the timing of all this, right at the uptick again of the number of cases surging, is the worst time to do this. This isn't my words; these are Democrat responses.
Whenever you can't argue the valence or the value of decision, you argue the timing. And then you use the timing to point to non-points. It's something they do. You say, well, because of the timing, it's implied that it was done for this reason. Then you can argue reasons that people aren't actually using for what they're doing. I know that sounds really complicated, but they do it all the time. Republicans and Democrats do it. When you can't argue the actual decision because taking the opposite position would be unpopular, you argue the timing, which is what's happening now. Don't be confused by that. Take the reasons they said they were leaving the WHO, and Grant's going to go over those, I'm sure, and decide for yourself. Because timing has nothing to do with it, because if those reasons are okay now, then they were okay 6 months ago, and they would be okay 6 months from now. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
That's exactly how it went down. Here's the story. The United States is officially, I stress officially, my emphasis, not the articles, but is officially withdrawing from the WHO amid lingering doubts about how the United Nations agency handled the emergency of the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. The virus as the outbreaks was going on there. This is coming as of an update as of yesterday. And the withdrawal will go into effect next year. And WHO spokesman, that's also it's exactly what Shine's just talking about. So if the withdrawal is not going to go into effect until next year anyways, then what's the conversation about timing? What does that even matter right now? Goodness gracious, man. A WHO spokesperson told the Epoch Times, quote, we have received reports that the U.S. has submitted a formal notification to the UN Secretary General that it is withdrawing from the WHO effective July 6, 2021. That's almost the exact word-for-word verbatim tweet quote that you're seeing all over the internet as well. Now, WHO director told reporters in May that he hoped the United States would not cut ties with the group. Again, this conversation in May. He called America, quote, a long-standing and generous friend to the WHO. We give him $400 million a year, so no other country comes close to that, I think. Now, private donors might. But this way, is a long-standing and generous friend because we're funding a lot of it, man. We hope it will continue to be so, he says. The United States was the group's largest funder, regularly pouring hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis. And again, I'm fairly certain that number is 400 million. The Hill story I have linked in the show notes indicates that as well. Epoch Times goes on to say Trump, a Republican who's up for re-election in November, announced in May that the United States would formally terminate its relationship with the WHO. Here's some of the reasoning he gave then. Quote, we have detailed the reforms that it, meaning the WHO, must take and have engaged with them directly, but they have refused to act. Because they failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms, we will be today. It's an interesting way to say that. We will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent global health needs. So the indication of this happening was coming all the way back in May, and dare I say even earlier than then. Now, here's the part where I didn't link it in the show notes. I just didn't have time to put this together because, it's just something I want to make people aware of. But the Epoch Times is reporting on other international health groups could receive the funding an administration official told reporters in April. And this is where Kelly gave us some updates about what those other international organizations might be. Some of those international organizations may, strong emphasis on may end up being a Bill Gates controlled project. I'm looking at the headline right now coming from USAID.gov, statement by USAID Administrator Mark Green on the contribution to, I don't know if this is just GAVI or Gavi or how you pronounce that, but it's GAVI and a large sort of portion of that going to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well, which is a vaccine alliance essentially. So I don't know, just something to keep an eye on as to, yes.
Who wrote that now?
Story. This is coming from USA.gov.
USA.gov.
USAID, AID, USAID.gov, yeah.
It may be people who work there hoping that's where it's going. Remember that, too. A lot of people throw things out there and hope they're self-fulfilling prophecies. Because I've heard there's a lot of tension between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the U.S. government at the moment. But you never know. I mean, the U.S. government's very big. You know what I mean? And and the administration itself doesn't seem to have complete control, especially over these, what would you call it, NGO, you know what I mean, non-government organizations, which I assume is what USAID.gov is. If they're an aid organization, I bet there's some kind of like federally funded non-profit-like grant organization. Not like Grant Henry, but granting money, which are usually run like kind of independently. In my opinion, that's what it seems they usually are, with only tacit connections through legislation and things like that to regulatory agencies. So it may be what they hope the money would go to, because they see that because the money from the WHO was going there anyway.
Yeah, man.
So they just want to keep that flow, probably.
Yeah, and that's
all me guessing. By the way, that's me doing punditry. That's not news. That's just guessing. So.
But it's also one of the reasons why I brought this up, man, is just to say that, like, yes, we are pulling funding out and we are pulling, I guess, cooperation out from the WHO. That doesn't necessarily mean, obviously, that we're stopping anything remotely even involving with what they were working on either. Nor does it mean that we're taking money, just stop spending in that area altogether. Like, it's going to go somewhere else. It's just interesting to consider where that other portion might go, right? I think it's exactly what Shine was saying, too. We can't jump to too much conclusions right now. Jonathan said in Facebook, most does, but the problem is they go to bad actors, coming out bad actors. That's enough reform. Kelly says, I'm all in support of withdrawal from the WHO. However, the subsequent transfer of funds to the Bill Gates via Gavi is, and I don't even know that's how it's pronounced, but check me, is absolutely 100% concerning. Eric said WHO equals corrupt communist sympathizers. That's probably the best way to like headline that to like, put it in a nutshell type thing. I mean, that's the reason why we pulled out of the WHO. WHO equals corrupt communist sympathizers. I mean, like, that's straight up what happened, bro. That's exactly how it went down.
Well, you know what's weird about that too, Grant? You know what's so weird about it? It didn't say China was the number one funder of the WHO, right? Didn't say that. It said we were. And I think you can look at this story and use it as a Rosetta Stone for many things. Why are you bending down and bowing to the Chinese when we're the number one funder? Why would you do that?
Right.
Like, why would you, like, if we're your number one funder, at least have some bias towards us. If they tell you not to pass on information, pass it on anyway. And why would you? Why would you even do that? Is it because you have so much hubris that you think we would never stop funding you? Or are you more scared of China than you are of losing our money? These are important questions, because we said corrupted, right? We said, our listener just said corrupted. They weren't. It's not like the Chinese started paying $1 billion to the WHO. Therefore, they got preferential treatment or had a bias towards protecting their political class or anything like that. What is the reason? These are important questions we need to know the answers to. Is it just hubris? Because, I don't want to attribute hubris where there could be malice.
Right.
Occam's razor, that kind of thing. I don't want to just say maybe it was stupidity, maybe it was hubris, maybe there was something more than your typical corruption. All the more reason why we should leave. All the more reason why we should leave, because it's either they don't care about not having our money, or they're more scared of the Chinese than they are losing our money. Right. And why would they be scared? Are they personally threatened? Who knows? I have no idea, but this is all good reasons why we should leave that alone, because it doesn't make sense on its face. And when things don't make sense on their face, that means someone's lying or there's things we don't know. And in this case, I think the things we don't know could harm us. And that's going back to the reason why we left the WHO in the first place. Things we didn't know that harmed us, which means there's probably other things that we don't know that could harm us in the future. And it's better that we terminate the relationship.
Man, and look at exactly what you're saying. Look at the way that some of these comment sections are rolling out in the Democrat statements or the Democrat tweets or even Republican tweets, to be frank. I mean, I got one from Lamar Alexander right here. Here's Senator Lamar Alexander's response to this. Now Lamar Alexander, or Senator Alexander, obviously from Tennessee, he's the chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. All right, so this is like his wheelhouse stuff. He says, quote, "I disagree with the president's decision. Certainly, there needs to be a good hard look at mistakes the WHO or World Health Organization might have made." Really? I thought that was like a certainty. Let me just read this from the beginning, man. I just stumbled across this. He said, "I disagree with the president's decision. Certainly, there needs to be a good hard look at mistakes the World Health Organization might have made in connection with coronavirus." Is that a misspeak? He goes on to say, but the time to do that is after the crisis has been dealt with, not in the middle of it. Said withdrawal could interfere with clinical trials for CCP. Oh, that's Epoch Times calling it CCP virus. That's fine, whatever. For coronavirus vaccine, CCP virus vaccines, doesn't matter what you call it. I thought I was about to go on this whole tirade, Sean, about the idea that there seems to be a virtual consensus at this point that the WHO just got this wrong, that they dropped the ball, that they really messed up. And I say that, man, because I'm taking some of this word from people like my brother. Again, if you're new to the program here, I reference my brother all the time for several different reasons. One of which is I consider the guy to be one of the most intelligent individuals I've ever had the pleasure of knowing personally, an extreme work ethic, but he's also straight up liberal, Democrat. He's a classical liberal. That's exactly what he is. He's genuinely open to most things, but he's also a clinical neuroscientist. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to anything relating to anything in the scientific realm and what it means to compare statistics. And even he will say, he will not even just readily admit, it's his opinion that he just volunteers a lot of time, is the WHO just straight dropped the ball. Their ability to trade trustworthiness now is non-existent. He will even say that they have tarnished their reputation so much that in the scientific community, they are not an authority to be trusted anymore. So if that's the case that I'm getting from the consensus of those that need to deal with the data, then I don't know what Lamar Alexander's coming at right now. I guess the point I'm trying to make, and which I thought I could make, is that it seems like an indefensible position to defend the WHO right now. Now, there's all kind of other reasons why you could claim that there would be a bad decision. Maybe the timing thing could work for some people, but to try and defend the WHO, and I'm not even necessarily saying that's what Lamar Alexander is doing. I find it odd. It hits my ear weird when he says we need to take a hard look at the mistakes that the WHO might have made. It's just strange tense to put it in too. Might have made. Did they make them or not? Or are you saying they might make them in the future? What does that mean? I don't know what that means, Lamar.
If he had said intentional in there, it might have made sense.
Right?
they might have made intentional mistakes. Whatever, even though that doesn't make sense either. But let me ask a question, Grant. Is the only reason you fire someone, or I'll wait till you have your headphones on. Is the only reason you fire someone from a job because they stole from you?
No, right.
I mean, they could come every day and not steal from you, and they could just be terrible at selling. Say you make glass for a living, and you sell cups and plates and whatever. Say they've never sold a cup or plate ever. They could just be bad at their job and get fired.
Right.
You don't have to be corrupt to get fired. You don't have to do something criminal at your job to get fired.
That's a great point.
Sometimes if you just suck at your job, your boss says, this might not be for you. Maybe you should go do something else. So like, I don't know, maybe the most important time we needed the WHO to be perfect, like during a pandemic, and then they sucked at their job. Because, like, when's the next time the WHO is going to get a chance to step up? I don't know. The next pandemic? You know, in 3017? You know, or whatever. You get what I'm saying. Like, 100 years from now? When's the next time they're going to get a chance? I'd rather say that $400 million, we start the UHO, the United States Health Organization, and just fund it with the same money. I mean, like, put Americans in there, and then we can share that information with the rest of the world if we want. We want, but we don't call it the world thing. We call it the U.S. thing. I don't know, but it's like you sometimes fire people because they suck, and I think that's what's going on. I don't think anyone is necessarily saying, it's more implied that there was corruption. It's more implied. I mean, I guess they said there was corruption, but they could just suck, which they did.
They could just, that's a great point, man. You don't have to jump all the way to the corruption chain or even necessarily the negligence train to say that, like, they just did a bad job. And if it is true that we have the most amount of data in the world right now, because we're dealing with the most amount of cases and we've been dealing with the most amount of cases for the longest period of time, if all that stuff is true, which I think is factually accurate to say, then what you're saying, Sean, is definitely where it needs to be. Like, if we have all the data and we're putting all the time into it, man, then we should probably be the world's leading authority on what is and is not, how this stuff is going to play out. At least the modeling data should be most accurate when it comes to the American statistics. That much, I think, is absolutely got to be for sure. And if that is the case, then goodness gracious, man, I don't know. You couple that with the WHO just doing a bad job, and it seems like a waste of money. Now, Norm said in Facebook, Lamar is getting Biden syndrome. Eric said really messed up might be the understatement of the year. Norm said the WHO didn't prevent COVID, just like the Paris Accord couldn't control the climate. Interesting. What do we benefit from the WHO? And all of this, I think, as we're tailing into the last 15 minutes of the show here, I frankly think that if every politician is talking about the timing of something like this, I think the timing of something like this with the WHO has not as much to do with it. I was about to say as much to do with it. It's not true. It at least has something to do with what we've seen going on with the TikTok situation. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain in a second. And what Christopher Wray, the bombs that he dropped yesterday. I don't want to hide the ball on that one. Here's the headline coming from BBC. I'll just read it straight up. The director of the FBI has said that acts of espionage and theft by China's government pose the greatest long-term threat to the future of the United States. I think that statistics that I read was nearly half of their open espionage cases right now are devoted to China, Chinese players, agents, government, whatever. He says we've reached the point where the FBI is now opening a new China-related counterintelligence case every 10 hours. Opening a new case every 10 hours. Here's the stat. He says, of the nearly 5,000 active counterintelligence cases currently underway across the country, almost half are related to China. That's the exact statistic. Of the 5,000, nearly 2,500, I suppose, are related to China. Now, before I dive too much headlong into that, this whole layout started about a day or two ago from this article that I pulled from CNBC, and we just didn't have time to cover it. We got into the Marxism stuff, which I think is a little bit more important for the time being, and whatever else. But the CNBC story came from a couple days back. It would indicate that the U.S. is looking into banning TikTok and Chinese social media apps. Now, this is coming from Pompeo himself. U.S. is looking to ban, and again, one more time, keep in mind, this is coming from a couple days ago. U.S. is looking at banning TikTok and other social media apps. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told Fox News on Monday. His comments come amid rising tensions between the U.S. and China as scrutiny on TikTok and Chinese technology firms continue to grow. Pause real quick. TikTok. If you don't know what it is, I would suggest you probably don't need to know what it is. Just think like, I don't know, a bunch of Snapchats that you can just scroll through.
No. It's been in the
simultaneously.
news. I can remind people. So you know where the meme where the people were dancing with the coffin, and then everyone copied that, and then they showed it on NBC and everything like that because people in hospitals were doing it and stuff like that. Those were TikTok videos. Also, you've heard TikTok in the news. If you paid attention to any of the news that had to do with the Tulsa Trump rally, they said that people on TikTok bought up all the tickets and made the Trump organization think that way more people were going to be there. That was a huge part of the coverage. Activist after the event saying, ha ha ha, all those little girls on TikTok got you. And I think the FBI looked into it and said, oh, those weren't little girls. Those were bots coming from Chinese firms, bot firms. But anyway, I'll let you get into the story. Those are two things where you probably heard TikTok in the news recently.
And as far as what TikTok actually is, most people that listen to the program are definitely going to know what it is. But the app itself, I would, again, suggest don't need to do anything with the app. But it's just a stream. It's just a constant stream of little 15 to 60-second videos. And you can fill in your blank for any of those things. It's like Vine used to be back in the day. But it's literally like video. And all you have to do is scroll. And it's 15, 60 seconds. And it's all kind of stuff, man. It's anything you would think kids do nowadays. But the whole premise is based upon the idea of like short entertainment in your face, one after the other after another. And there's a very strange psychological component too that's almost addictive in nature. Totally different, separate conversation, but that's part of the scheme behind a lot of this stuff. Going on with the story. When asked in a Fox News interview if the U.S. should be looking at banning TikTok and other social media apps, Pompeo said, "We are taking this very seriously. We are certainly looking at it. We have worked on this very issue for a long time," he says. Now, quote, he goes on, quote, "Whether it was the problem of having Huawei technology in your infrastructure, we've gone all over the world and we're making real progress getting that out. We've declared ZTE a danger to American national security." Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this TikTok story from Monday is to let you know about the Huawei situation as well. This is just one thing in a string of China tech-related incidents or attacks or back and forth. I don't care how you term it. One of the major, in my opinion, the biggest story of last year that gets no coverage at all. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I literally mean what I think is arguably the largest story of last year that nobody talked about then and hardly anybody's talking about now is that Huawei story. Huawei is basically like if the American government owned Apple, that's Huawei with China. And that's even putting it lightly. Huawei is basically just the Chinese government.
That's not even really a good example.
Right?
Maybe if Comcast and Apple were the same company, because Huawei is also, or Verizon, actually Verizon. If Verizon and then a phone maker, like a service provider and a phone maker, like Apple. So, and the number one, what do you call it? Cable provider and the number one phone maker, if they were in the same company and owned by the U.S. government, that's what Huawei is. So it's like Apple and Verizon with no other competition. So like Comcast doesn't exist. Other phone makers don't exist. You know, things like that. It's only Apple and Verizon, and they're owned by the U.S. government. That's what Huawei is to China.
That's exactly what it is, right? The idea, man, is that Huawei has complete control over everything that China's putting out. You couple that with the expansion of what's going on with 5G right now. And the biggest story that happened out of this last year, and I frankly, Shine, I don't know how this happened, how it went down, how the executive order was so effective in what I'm about to say. So at some point, Trump issued an executive order that basically had regulations attached to it that essentially said, y'all stop doing business with Huawei. Y'all, meaning Google, Apple, Microsoft, all of them. Stop doing business with Huawei or else. And I never really followed up on what that or else was, but I do know the largest story that came out of last year is that Google ended up telling Huawei that you can no longer use Android as an operating system. All right. Now, one thing you have to understand about the operating systems is there's basically only two operating systems in the entire world, save the Windows operating system, which really isn't even a thing. And BlackBerry, I suppose, is a thing somewhere, but isn't that kind of an Android open source based? Doesn't matter. You got two phones. All right. You have an Android and an Apple. Now, Apple just makes its own stuff. Apple is Apple. It's going to be an iPhone all day long. It's this vertically integrated software that only Apple can touch. Android is what you've seen for every other phone out there. This is a Google Pixel. You've seen, I don't know, man, LG makes phones. You've seen Sony makes phones. Samsung makes phones. All the other phone manufacturers are not the thing that you scroll through. The thing you're messing with on your finger, that's called an operating system. And Android controls the overwhelming percentage of operating systems in the world on smartphones. I'm talking like most of them. Most of these cell phones in the world are controlled or used with this Android operating system. And somehow last year, this executive order forced Google to no longer give Android operating system updates to Huawei, meaning Huawei had to develop its own operating system. Dude, it was a major catastrophic blow to the company. And I know it sounds like I'm stressing that too much. I promise you I'm not.
No, you're doing the right amount of stress, right? And I can give you more context. They didn't just tell companies to drop Huawei. They told countries to drop Huawei. And that's part of when the United States was successful getting Great Britain to do it, that's when the big tech companies said, oh, we better follow suit. Because we told Great Britain, our number one partner for national security information sharing, and basically the way we're tied into information sharing into European governments is through London, right? Mm-hmm. So not just England, not just the UK, but also most of Europe by extension, because this is the way things go. Because that's where the lines run through. The actual hard lines run to the UK and then run underwater to America, by the way. That's how that works. The hard lines, the secure lines, okay? The secure lines, not the ones that go through the air that can be stolen, okay? They said to the UK, we will no longer do intelligence sharing with you if you integrate Huawei 5G. They argued for a little bit, and then they said, okay, well, we'll essentially be blind because you're providing us all our intelligence and all of Europe, all their intelligence.
Right.
And America said, we don't care if we don't get any from you. We just don't care. You'll be off on an island, no pun intended. And that's when the companies really followed suit. And it started a cascade because China had been on a tour all over the world selling everyone on free 5G. In fact, I think even before the UK, we got some of the Eastern Bloc countries to agree to not do Huawei. And that was the first domino to fall. Then UK, by extension, all of Europe said no Huawei. Then we moved into Asia. Then we moved, and we also went to American companies, said no Huawei. And it worked for whatever reason, mostly because just like the WHO, we're the largest contributor to everything everywhere. And all we had to do was say we won't contribute anymore. Whether that's we're the largest contributor of money, we're the largest contributor of resources, we're the largest contributor of information. So no matter, and probably other things that I can't think of. So all we had to do was threaten to cut off either money, information, or everything. And it worked for whatever reason. But I just wanted to add a little more context. It wasn't just companies. It was also countries and entire continents that we discouraged Huawei in. And it really, it set them back probably to phase 1 of their plan. For sure.
Because I don't think people need the breakdown of the 5G stuff as to why that's so important. Just to suffice it to say that the reason why 5G is so important has to do with something called latency. Like what you guys are watching right now, what you're hearing on your screen, there's technically about a 40-second to 1 minute lag from when I'm actually saying it in real time, in real life, if you will, to when you all are hearing it. That's something called latency. The time it takes for me to do something to get across and ping across to where you are. 5G technology will decrease that latency to the point that information transmission is almost instantaneous, which I cannot tell you the implications of that. I mean, you could think the implications of that, but as transmission of information goes, it is the sole thing that has progressed society in some sense. I mean, shoot, man, we can go back to the telegraph if you want to. You can go back to the telephone if you want to. It doesn't matter. Getting information from point A to point B arguably controls warfare most of the time as well. And that's where a lot of these things are going. That's why 5G build-out is so important. That's why what Shine said is so important as well. Because a lot of these countries that China was building out 5G in didn't even want it. Like, I remember reading stories from the BBC about certain areas surrounding China that were saying, like, well, they're just building this stuff out here, but we didn't ask for it. Like, we didn't have any meetings about this going on. They're just kind of here doing it. And now we have to figure out what to do in retrospect. Now, back to the TikTok story.
And speaking of war, I'm so sorry I keep interrupting you, Grant. Speaking of war, India and China have been having skirmishes on the northern border And
Yes.
I'm probably getting into the article. I'm so sorry. But
No,
India
dude.
just banned TikTok. And they are having aggression with China.
Mm-hmm.
So like TikTok is not just, oh, the Chinese are running it and we don't like China, so we're going to get rid of it. It's not that. You bring war. That's all. I guess that's all I really want to say, and leave the rest as implication. I'll let you get to the article. But you brought in war, and it's like there's some relevance there. There is a country that is having armed conflict with China, at least on a small scale, and they banned TikTok.
That's the perfect
And
time to
people
bring
in
that up,
India
man.
are committing suicide over it.
Yeah,
Because
right.
like they're, I don't know. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but it's so ugly. It's so ugly.
That's the perfect time to bring it up because honestly, there's only 5 minutes left of the program that we normally have. I may go a little bit over today if y'all want to. If we still got people tuning in or whatever, but I don't even know if I was going to have time to get to that portion of it. But that's exactly what it is, man. All this stuff is phasing out to something obviously far bigger, much larger than just the TikTok stuff. And Jonathan hit the TikTok stuff on the head a second ago. He made a comment when he said TikTok is in Hong Kong. China, that's another related story. That's why it was so important to bring up the military-related stuff that Shine just brought up. The related story about the Chinese law that passed, the security law that passed on Hong Kong, which basically is like phase one of making Hong Kong part of China. That's what's going on. It's essentially phase one of the ballot, the shot across the bow of China basically saying like, you know what, man, forget about this agreement that we had with other countries a while back. We're not waiting on that thing to end. Like, you guys are a part of us now. And that story has been going on for a very long time. Very, very long time. Jonathan said, though, TikTok is in Hong Kong. China has them in their court system. They are looking at relocating. The problem is, if the Chinese courts get their way, there will be no TikTok information that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have access to. So in anticipation of all this, India and everyone else is thinking like, all right, dude, however many tens of millions of people are on this TikTok app right now, like, what do we do? And there were some other comments coming on Facebook here a second ago. I think it was from Jonathan and Eric that were going back and forth talking about one of the reasons why you can't have Blackberries anymore, or whether maybe it's Huawei phones you can't have anymore, maybe it's both. It's because the chips themselves, the silicon development in these chips themselves that are Chinese made, just has spy technology built into it, man. Like, it's just baked into the phone right there for you. Convenient as ever. Just, you want to tap some emails? Don't even worry about trying to fish that through the back door. Just send them a chip, man. They'll do it for you. Now, finishing this story, the TikTok story, and then I want to get into.
I hate to jump in one more time about since you brought up the chips. Since you brought up the chips, the U.S. government banned Huawei phones at U.S. military installations.
Yep.
If you can look that story up, that happened almost a year ago. Where it's like, this is not an isolated story. This story is part of a mosaic of stories that point to some scary stuff, to be perfectly honest, and point to how this isn't like politics. This is something more serious than that. This isn't like we don't like China. This is dangerous for us to have TikToks on U.S. phones. In the United States. That's what it's about. And other countries see it the same way. India sees it the same way. I'm sure if we do it, Japan will do it. If Japan does it, South Korea will do it. And it won't be the only app. It'll be the first domino. Tinder and Grindr will follow because Tinder and Grindr are run out of China. And people think that or I would even say people know that the purpose of those things is to blackmail important people, is to use personal information, things they would say to people that they are trying to have sexual encounters with, which are things you wouldn't want to be public if you're an important person, especially on Grindr. You know, probably, I would assume. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying. It won't be the only app. TikTok will be the beginning, and then it will be many that fall.
Dude, Jessica just said on Facebook, the Chinese government cares not about their people. This goes right along with what you just said, Sean, about using it as a threat, right? Using it as blackmail, forcing people to do something they wouldn't want to do with by means of some of this information. That's exactly what it's about. It's actually a program called Project Fox Hunt. More on that in just a second. Jessica said on Facebook, the Chinese government cares not about their people or their soldiers. They certainly want to be the superpower in the world. Pause. That is almost verbatim what FBI Director Wray said yesterday. That is exactly what he's saying. China wants to be the superpower in the world, not just with technology, economy, literally anything else out there. They want to be the superpower in the world. That is what this is about. Going back to Jessica's comment, she said, I helped run a Chinese restaurant for the last 5.5 years. Very interesting. The things I've heard my bosses and coworkers talking about is horribly sad and repulsive. The only good things they say about home is some of the scenery. The government is so oppressive, she says. To Shine's point and to Jessica's point, the FBI director yesterday mentioned this program called Project Fox Hunt. He said that Project Xi Jinping had spearheaded and said that it was the greatest Chinese, it was geared at Chinese nationals living abroad seen as threats to the Chinese government. Quote, we're talking about political rivals, dissidents, and critics seeking to expose China's extensive human rights violations. This is exactly what Jessica and Shine are just talking about. This is the apps are being used to gather and garner information to hold their folks to the fire, so to speak. He went on to say, that is, FBI Director Wray went on to say that the Chinese government wants to force them to return to China, and China's tactics to accomplish that are shocking. Continuing, he said, when it couldn't locate one Fox Hunt target, the Chinese government sent an emissary to visit the target's family here in the United States. The message they said to pass on, the target had two options: return to China promptly or commit suicide. Those were the two options that the Chinese government gave these people, and I presume probably gathering some of the information for the location as to where these people lived off of some of these apps. The Chinese government that goes back to these nationals and says, return to China promptly or commit suicide. And if I can add a little bit of something to that, what I think is probably happening, take this also, one more story. The number of Chinese-related individuals that are being arrested in our academic system right now. I'm pretty sure some of the other application that's happening here is return to China promptly so you can share the information that you were supposed to be garnering along with these technological apps that we'd be getting information from as well. We need their academia. We need their economics. We need the apps. We need techno. We need all of it. Bring it back to China or commit suicide. Apparently, this program called Project Fox Hunt was originally began in 2015 to target people accused of corruption and has reportedly led to the capture of thousands of fugitives. However, reports of extraordinary rendition of the political opponents by Beijing have multiplied in recent years. Recent years. Talking about booksellers that have gone missing, journalists that have gone missing, authors. It doesn't matter. Ray went on to say that China is fast becoming a new kind of threat to the West, not so much because of its growing military capabilities, though that is a factor, he says, but because in economic and technical terms, it is already a peer competitor of the United States and a peer competitor in a very different kind of world. That's why I said one more time that I'm pretty sure one of the largest stories of last year that gets very little press was that Huawei story. And this is why Shine and I have been very consistent on Real News talking about going into the 2020 election. Going into the 2020 election, one of the largest stories is going to be this China-related story. And frankly speaking, making another very odd connection, only because it ties in with some of the final things here as we're wrapping up the show for the 2020 election coming up. If you really want to dive down the rabbit hole, look a little bit into that Burisma deal and the Chinese connections there. Now, for those that are following along, you already know where that would be going, but Joe Biden's son ran into a little bit of a problem, dare I say, when maybe he was using his political power and political influence to gain some contracts or get a job with this Burisma company out in Ukraine. I don't know, man. Who maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Doesn't really necessarily matter. He himself did say he wasn't qualified for that job. Now, some of the backers may or may not have been China. I don't know, man. Maybe the money was coming from there. Maybe it wasn't. But the point is that some prosecutor started looking into it somewhere. And this prosecutor was Ukrainian. And when that started happening, Joe Biden, then vice president, basically came out and said, not even basically, this is on recording, this is taped. You can go listen to Joe Biden say it himself if you want to. He said it multiple times. He has no problem talking about this. He withheld over $1 billion in United States funding to Ukraine specifically on the contingency that Ukraine fired this prosecutor that was looking into his son. Now, I personally believe that one of the reasons why Trump pushed for that to be exposed so hard is because the final element of that story had something to do with this larger China story. Now, I don't frankly know what the entirety of that is yet. I mean, I could speculate, but I need a guy like Colonel Tony Schaefer to come on here and really fill in the blanks for me. But I can guarantee that the larger part of that Ukraine Burisma story had something to do with the funding in the back end or the relationship to the Chinese stuff in the back end or something like that. Maybe the $1.5 billion that came from it, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that's what's trying to be exposed. And,
well, you got to tie it all in together, Grant. Why do you think that over half of the espionage cases are about China? In fact, Jonathan said if you go look at the statistics, it's more like 2/3 in the comments. I can't verify that, but Jonathan just said that. They're finding all these different ties to different institutions in the United States. We interviewed a Knoxville reporter on how a vice president of TVA had been recruited by a Chinese espionage asset here in the United States and was giving over information about the TVA power grid and how it worked and how the plans for the nuclear reactors and things like that. He was charged with espionage, a vice president of TVA. Then you see every day now how they've infiltrated our academic institutions and are basically like paying American professors to do research for Chinese firms that ultimately do very bad things. Or they're taking money from institutions. So like there's all these different institutions that are being infected with Chinese espionage assets. Probably very similar to what we were dealing with in the 60s and 70s with the Russians. Very similar. Because that was a thing. So I would assume that they've infected our political institutions as well. But that's more sensitive, right? Right. It's easy to arrest a professor. It would be very difficult to arrest a acting legislator or a former legislator or an active member of the executive branch or even a former member of the executive branch. That's a little more sensitive. But that's why I would assume there's such a big push to look into these espionage cases. They're doing like a regular police investigation, regular criminology. Go get the low-level people. Get them to rat on the higher-level people. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
That's tying it all together. There's other institutions besides academia, technology, and energy that have been infected by assets of the Communist Chinese Party.
Man, and you brought up Russia a second ago, and don't count them out. Not you, Sean, but like Putin has been on record saying, this is like 4 or 5 years ago. This interview came out, but he was talking to like almost like a committee style room full of journalists and folks and everyone else, and he just straight up said, like, listen, I'm under no illusions here to think that that Russia is not a paper tiger. Of course we're a paper tiger. Like we can do a lot of stuff about anything right now. Like we don't have a super strong military. Our GDP is not fantastic. Okay, I get it. Now, we're not necessarily the Russia of old, but it does matter who we back. Even if we're in case, it's place 3, 4, or 5 or whatever. If we back, if the number 4 team backs the number 2 team, then that alliance is arguably going to be more powerful in any particular trackable sense than the number 1 team. So I think Russia still has a point to play here. And again, if any of the stories that anybody is hearing or reading is true about both Russia and China buying like hundreds of thousands of acres of land in South America, man, I don't know. There's weird stuff a-coming is all I'm saying. There's just strange stuff a-coming, strange stuff happening. Hey, man, I'll end the show this way here too, because, Sean and I got to get to do some real things here by today. One update I did want to give, you're going to hear much, much more about this on Friday's show, but I teased and tagged something in the Nashville area for all my Nashville folks about a property tax increase that happened here. 34% property tax increase is what happened. Now, at AFP, I teased about a week or so, it's about 2 weeks back at this point, that AFP was going to get heavily, heavily involved. And we are. I finally got word that we are. AFP is a large company, man. It takes a while for everybody to get on the same page is what it ended up coming down to. But we're all on the same page now with the effort of what's going forward. I will have much, much more to come. If you are in the Middle Tennessee area and you want to help, put that on a ballot issue. Put the property tax increase as a ballot issue. Give that voice back to the people. Give that vote back to the people. We need your help gathering signatures. I will have much more updates as to how we're going to go about doing that, whether it be through door knocking or texting or phone calling or any of the stuff that we do to get the word out to the people of registered voters in Davidson County. And the final thing I want to say here is one of the more interactive stories that we've had, or one of the stories that we post on Real News that we get in, we've received more interaction than we have in most of the stories in the past, was that headline that, Sean, I want to say it was you that posted, or maybe it was Richard. I know I didn't post it, but the headline from NBC Montana asking, should people who tear down monuments be prosecuted? Should people who tear down monuments be prosecuted? Now, the overwhelming majority of people that commented on that story said, in a sense of like, oh, well, obviously, yes, of course. Like, why? How is that a question? That was the sentiment I was getting. Save one individual whatever. I don't know if it was being devil's advocate or this person generally feels this way or whatever. It was just bringing up an interesting point of like, well, if we all own the statues, we should all be able to tear them down and blah, blah, blah. He was probably just trying to start conversation. Doesn't matter. Most of the people said, yes, obviously, those people should be prosecuted. I just wanted to give you the statistics from that NBC Montana article. 5,555 people agreed with our audience, but 16,002 people disagreed. The statistics there are 26% of people said that, yes, those people should be prosecuted. The overwhelming majority, 74%, said no, they should not be prosecuted. Just something interesting to think about, something interesting to leave it on here. My name is Mr. Henry, by the way. Stay tuned for the shows tomorrow and especially the show on Friday. We're going to have a full rollout of how you can help with this effort in Middle Tennessee. And it's not just the property tax issue. It does a bunch of awesome, fantastic stuff, all putting power back into people's hands. My name is Mr. Henry. David Shine Thompson. We're signing off for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Love y'all.